Hey folks, I'm trying to sit in such a way that you can see the moon behind me, but it's a little hard. But I guess the reason I want to do that is because I'm hoping that uh, I can remind everybody that we all live under the same moon for the video that I'm about to make, because I'm probably gonna start making a few enemies now. My last video I was complaining about my problems that I had with the Coen brothers. And now I'm going after Christopher Nolan next, because I've been kind of wondering for the last few days why I've never completely fallen head over heels for Christopher Nolan's movies like a lot of other folks have. And I think I know why now. I think it just comes down to the fact that he made two movies. He made Following and he made Memento. And both films, as far as I'm concerned, are both brilliant. They both make incredibly brave choices in both their narratives and in their editing. More so Memento, but definitely the case is, I can make the case for the Following. Because I mean, I don't know, a lot of people describe that film as being kind of cheap, but I think it has a pretty timeless feel personally. I think it's really underrated. I don't know, that might be my favorite. And although I will admit I did love Oppenheimer, and I can defend that movie pretty well, I feel like. I don't think it's a perfect movie, but I can at least be thankful for it, because it did make for one of the greatest, one of the all-time most entertaining theatrical experiences I've had. For me, it was up there with the theater experience I had for The Lion King, for Grindhouse, for Little Miss Sunshine. Like, all three of those were hysterical, crazy, wild, and emotional theatrical experiences, and with audiences that were really engaged with it. And the same could be said for Oppenheimer, although the reasons for the enthusiasm with Oppenheimer were more because of what was going on at the time with Barbie. And I will admit, there is nothing quite so brilliant as being in a theater in an audience with people dressed as Barbie taking selfies while watching Oppenheimer. I think there's just nothing that will ever beat that. The other thing about Oppenheimer is, the audience was really engaged with it throughout. Again, just like they were with the other films I mentioned, and then at the very end of the movie, after this enormous revelation with Einstein and everything going on in the circumstances and the implications and everything kind of being epitomized in the final shots of the film, some lady behind me is like, I don't see what the big deal was. That wasn't very good. So it's sort of like the punchline to the movie. And I will admit, I can't blame a person for maybe not being as enthused with Oppenheimer as somebody like me would be, because you see, I've always been fascinated with the Manhattan Project. I think ever since I played Metal Gear Solid when I was maybe 8 years old, and I've read a lot about Oppenheimer, and I watched the miniseries as well that was made. I think it was made in the 80s, if I recall, exactly in 1980. I don't remember, but I remember I saw that after I saw the Oppenheimer movie, because my mom recommended it, and I actually thought it was really good. I thought it was a pretty spectacular biopic, as far as the structured presentation and it being a TV movie. That was excellent. And so I would say if folks are expecting a biography on Oppenheimer, they should go with that rather than the Christopher Nolan movie. But having said that, I did really enjoy the Nolan film a lot, and I thought it was very well done. So my biggest issue ultimately with Nolan's movies really comes down to the fact that after he made Memento, I don't think he's ever really made anything as daring on in the not in the not as far as like filmmaking goes, because he definitely does make a lot of really daring stuff. I think like obviously all the practical effects work and the techniques and the type of cameras he uses and everything, that like I feel like as a filmmaker he is very innovative. He is capable of making really human, really impactful experiences. But as far as the films that I found to be like the ones that lived up to that lived up to like the enormousness and the innovation of like Following and Memento, the only two I can think of right off the top of my head are Dunkirk and Oppenheimer, and that's basically it. The rest of his films, I feel, are a little bit too sort of tied to their genres. When it comes to films that are of a different genre, you know, films in the science fiction realm and the fantasy realm and the mystery realm and the noir realm and westerns and stuff like that, I feel like if you can break away from those conventions enough that I don't really get too like caught up in the actual sort of tropes of the genre, like I feel like I can untangle those things enough for a lot of movies. With Nolan's movies, I can't quite do that, only because I don't know. There's just too many things he does that make me feel uninvested and distanced from his characters. I don't feel like he's the strongest character writer. I feel like as a filmmaker, as a technical filmmaker, he's done some brilliant work. I think his sound design, his editing choices, and all that stuff are excellent. I think his storytelling skills are weak. Let's see. I'm thinking of his films. Insomnia. That was a remake of another movie, and I thought Nolan's movie was really good. I saw part of the original back when it was playing on IFC, but I was too young to understand it, and I ended up kind of falling asleep. So it's definitely a movie that I need to actually sit down and watch from beginning to end, the original Insomnia. But I thought Nolan's remake was really well done. I'm sorry, I'm trying to think what else he did. Oh yeah, okay. Okay, Batman Begins. So I wasn't particularly invested or entranced by Batman Begins. I felt like there were just a lot of frustrating and annoying and silly aspects to it. And even though I did admire a lot of the filmmaking, and I appreciated the fact that it was actually kind of genre comic based film that that actually had good actors in it and good performances and good character writing, I thought a lot of it felt overwrought. I thought that like it took forever for things to really get going. I don't know. It's not a film. Every time I try to rewatch it, I just can't quite. It just never quite clicks with me again. The Dark Knight was really good. The Dark Knight reminded me of like the Departed and a lot of other films. It had like a very classy style to it, and I appreciated it. And I appreciated the fact that it had a strong villain character. But it just felt really like bloated and too long to me. The Dark Knight Rises, I felt more frustrated by, because it felt like a giant build up to something that was like a bit of a deflating kind of letdown. So I would say, as far as all of the Batman movies that Nolan made, I don't think that any of them are as good as the most recent Robert Pattinson Batman movie. I'll just be honest. That's so far, along with Mask of the Phantasm, those are my two favorite Batman movies. Is the Robert Pattinson Batman and Mask of the Phantasm Batman. All the other Batmans, I have a lot of problems with. Anyway, Nolan's other movies. The Prestige, I liked a lot, actually. That's probably the only one I would rewatch off the top of my head. Inception, again, one-time watch. Lots of really good action sequences. I like the ending. I like the ideas. When I try to rewatch it, it just doesn't maintain the same level of suspense to me. I feel like the first time I watched it, it worked the best. And then subsequent rewatches kind of brought out too many of the big flaws. Interstellar, I had a lot of problems with the first part of that film, but I thought the payoff was actually pretty good. I don't know if I would rewatch that one, although I'm getting there. I'm starting to appreciate Interstellar more, I have to say, because there's a lot of things that it did that I don't think people give it credit for, or give it enough credit for. So, but I'm not going to get into that because I don't want to talk too much about Nolan. Honestly, it would make me a little sad if I went on talking to myself about Nolan for over half an hour. So I'll keep this short. What else? Tenet, I didn't mind too much. It was fun. Dunkirk, that was like a one-time watch, but it was a brilliant movie. Very dark and super intense. And then Oppenheimer, I love, but my biggest problem, though, I'd say as far as Oppenheimer goes, is even though I do love films that are completely like disjointed and out of order and dreamlike, and the experience of watching it is almost like a sort of walking through a dream. Like I could tell how like Nolan was inspired by Tarkovsky's Mirror with Oppenheimer for sure. And I don't mean that because Tarkovsky, like I don't mean to like sort of dwell on that too much, because yeah, Tarkovsky's my favorite filmmaker, and I really, really love all of his work. But I could see like this Oppenheimer was the one that had the clearest sort of through line to Tarkovsky, I would say. I guess my overall feeling about Oppenheimer is that like, as far as it being a great movie, the reasons I love it don't really have a whole lot to do with like Nolan, I guess, even though Nolan is the only person who probably would have been able to successfully pull off something like this. But my personal feeling is that let's just say Christopher Nolan didn't exist for a minute. All right, let's just pretend he didn't exist. Let's just say somebody else wrote this script and did it more or less the same way he did it, and chose actors that maybe weren't the same actors, but maybe were similarly equivalent actors, and told the movie through fragments and flashbacks and people sort of hindsight remembering things that changed them or affected them, or things that affected them in the present day, things like that. So many of those movies tend to get hated on, honestly, by most people. And I feel like the only reason that Oppenheimer won an Oscar is because Christopher Nolan directed it. Like the reason why it won Best Picture specifically, not just an Oscar, it won Oscar, but several Oscars. The reason why it was a successful movie is because Christopher Nolan directed it. Cillian Murphy is a brilliant actor. He's been doing brilliant work for years. Like Breakfast on Pluto, like nobody talks about that movie, but it's such a brilliant movie, and the performances are brilliant in it. I don't think he would have won an actor performance for a film like that had Christopher Nolan, not used his sort of influence. And so I guess my overall thoughts on Christopher Nolan is, even though he has had a successful film career, I'm not sold on him as a filmmaker. I feel like this new movie, The Odyssey, is going to be the ultimate test. And if he fails, he's going to have to probably start from scratch. He may be cast into the realm of M. Night Shyamalan. Even though I wouldn't say that M. Night Shyamalan is as good a filmmaker as Nolan. Obviously, I wouldn't say that. But I do think that people don't give Shyamalan enough credit for doing his own thing, which I can understand why they don't give him enough credit for that, because honestly, The Last Airbender is really pretty inexcusable at the end of the day, no matter which way you slice it. I think most people agree with me there. So there's my common ground, people, if you hate me for this video. But yeah, as far as M. Night Shyamalan goes, I don't know. I think The Last Airbender was a fluke, but I feel like even though I can't stand most of his movies, I feel like there are interesting things about even his worst films. Except for maybe Glass. I don't know. That one's pretty irredeemable. That's the one I secretly dislike more than The Last Airbender. But I'm not going to get into that because you see, now I'm opening a new can of worms and I gotta pause. All right. Peace, people.